Hello, I'm Grant. Welcome to Second Plate, a show that focuses on reusing ingredients and finding recipes that very easily just flow through together. So tonight we're going to be making some spicy chicken sandwiches. What I like about this is because you're going to be frying the chicken, there's a certain almost exclusivity to it because it's not something you can just make. You have to kind of plan ahead, but it's a really good party meal because with frying and just working with oil in general, you kind of want to find as many uses for it as you possibly can. So I find that this is a great dish to have people over, make a sandwich for someone, you can dish them out, and overall it's a lot of fun. So it should be pretty simple to follow and other than heat the oil, is an actually very easy sandwich to make that's got a decent amount of allure to it. So let's get cooking. All right, so what I'm gonna do is I have one simple chicken breast here. You can actually also use chicken thighs, just make sure they're deboned or debone them yourself. I opt to use a chicken breast because I just have them around pretty regularly. Just gonna put on some gloves here. And the way I like to kind of prepare this is I'm essentially going to make this into two different sandwiches. So what I like to do is I usually just will cut off the kind of trailing section. I suppose this is kind of the bottom of the breast. And then I'm going to go horizontally, and that's going to give us two patties that we're then going to tenderize and actually bread. So just going to kind of eye this, cut this off. And in general, what I would do with this is just very easy to bake with some other stuff. Or if I were going to make this with several people, it's not something that I'm going to throw away or waste. It just usually basically ends up in a chicken salad or anything that I would use just random bits of chicken for. So once I got that, I'm going to go ahead and do my best to slice this in half. This doesn't have to be perfect. I just find it convenient, and then the numbers come out kind of nice. If there is you're working with a smaller chicken breast or doing thighs, that's perfectly fine too. But since I'm going to the trouble of frying this sandwich, I like to make the sandwich itself outside of the chicken kind of up to that standard. So point being is I like to put a lot of stuff on top of the sandwich. So that's why I want to get these not as thin as possible, but really nice, thin, spread out. So there's plenty of room to stack it up on top of the sandwich. So with all my extra ingredients. Because I have one of my personal philosophies when it comes to a sandwich is I believe a sandwich needs to be easy to eat. So while on paper, a really tall sandwich could look amazing and you could have all these cool ingredients in it, but if realistically you have to eat every one of those ingredients one at a time because none of them will actually stay in the sandwich, I consider that to be a bad sandwich. So that's why I do the things I do. I'm the same stance with burgers in particular because that's really easy to, if you're not paying attention to it, you'll easily get just a giant puck and there's just no room to add anything. So I'm just going to tenderize this to make it a little bit easier. I'm also particularly trying to make sure it's kind of uniform in thickness because it's going to help it actually fry. So we're just going to go ahead and start tenderizing this. This is something where I feel everyone knows what tenderizing is, but until you actually start doing it, for myself, it's a lot more convenient than you would expect, especially if you plan ahead. And it really does add something to the meat. Now that said, I have this whole thing when it comes to chicken where I'm very lazy when I'm just cooking for myself. I have this example in my mind where, I really like, a chicken Caesar salad. But in essence, do I really want to go and bake, then chop up, cool down a whole chicken breast when I could just make a Caesar salad with a chicken breast side? And that's kind of how I feel with tenderizing, where I think objectively it really does help a lot of dishes. But sometimes I also recognize I just don't want to do that. And since I'm cooking for myself, I'm willing to take those shortcuts. Just pull this out. And I'm no expert on tenderizing, but I've really just found these small, really minute concrete taps to be the best. And really, if you just go at it extremely hard, you're not going to get anything extra out of it. it will not significantly cut down the time it takes, and you just will kind of bruise the meat. I'm sure there's a more technical term for what kind of happens there, but essentially you're compacting and smashing it, and you can do that a lot more evenly just with nice little taps. If you haven't noticed, one thing that's kind of interesting about going at like tenderizing chicken breast and stuff is you really feel around as you do that. Like, one thing I want to call out is you can tell, like, right with the side of the breast, how if I go tap, it very quickly evens out. But I can just tell that there's like a big, almost like a knot in the chicken, like right here. So that's why I'm trying to work that out, because that's essentially the center of mass for this. So I'm just going to talk through our sandwich while I go ahead and do this. We have a simple hamburger bun. I've got some decent mustard. I got some sun-dried tomatoes from a previous show. I'm not going to put lettuce on because I feel like, I'm not sure if I actually like lettuce on sandwiches. I feel like it's just always there. Like, I don't hate it, and it's okay, but I'm kind of like, if I had never had this before and someone just told me to do that, would I actually like it? So, plus, I feel like if you use lettuce that has any kind of ridge in it, it just lopsides the sandwich and contributes to like it falling apart. Okay. But we're going to put all that on. I've got some provolone cheese. I'm not sure if there's a go-to cheese for these sandwiches, but I feel like provolone was interesting enough and I can get some other uses out of it. Plus, to be honest, I would say my favorite cheese got to be like a Colby or cheddar. But I do find just white cheeses to be kind of just innately classier, so to speak. Just going to flip this, do my best to not actually touch this. And this is something I called out on a previous show, that I actually find using like food safety gloves to work with chicken just so effective. And I think it's something where if you don't know that, it will save you so much time and stress if you incorporate it into the kitchen. Because I think it feels like it would be something you would only use like in an actual restaurant. Like, I don't think there's anyone that's wearing a hairnet in their own kitchen. But it actually is like a serious tool, not just something to help the food safety. All right. That's going to be good enough. Even if it doesn't thin out, just the fact that I'm hitting it with like the ridge side will tenderize it, and you can tell a difference. But the main thing I'm just trying to think is, will this make a good sandwich? Cool, so I'm just going to peel away this. And you don't have to use the plastic wrap. It's just, again, it makes it so much more convenient. Also, it's just, cleanup's way easier with that. Although in my own kitchen, I've used whatever I have in hand, even like just nothing. Like, I've used foil. That works, but it's extremely loud. I do not recommend that. It's just annoying to everyone else in the room. But anyway, we're going to go actually start the breading. So here I just have some simple King Arthur flour. Going to be adding in my spices, cayenne pepper. Going to toss that in pretty generously because I want a spicy chicken sandwich. And I would actually even go almost further and use some like actual like ground up peppers, because I noticed that you might feel you're putting just an absolute lot. This is garlic salt, by the way. A lot in, but it doesn't necessarily translate one-to-one, so to speak. Got some more black pepper, add that in as well. One of the other reasons I like to tenderize it, paprika, and spread out the sandwich is really the spices are all in the breading. Let me just go. So the more surface area I have, the more it will actually translate to the sandwich. Just a second, so I'm just going to mix this up. And maybe that's also just personal preference. One thing I've found I like to do is to help kind of like cement in my mind like what certain flavors are, like say onion, or like if I'm using a new kind of hot sauce. I like to almost purposely put way too much in, just because then I have a very distinct memory of like, oh, that's what that was like. Or this is what, say, soup with too much onion is. So just got an empty bowl here. I'm going to crack 2 eggs in it. This is going to be our breading. I've seen a couple recipes that also do breading using, say, like milk. You can use, I think some used honey, I saw. It's a whole world you can go into. But this is probably, I'd say, by far the simplest. It's just eggs, maybe a little like bit of like milk or cream. And you just whisk it, and we're going to be running it through that and then into the flour. Like, I imagine like just the breading alone is something you could customize and specialize so much. So we're going to whisk that. And I should also mention, during this time that we're preparing this, I actually have my oil over here. I want it to be about 350, maybe a little higher, a little lower. And this is just something I kind of want to have prepped, ready on the side. I am using peanut oil, but you can really use pretty much any oil you want. Probably not olive oil, because that will start to smoke and just that'd be expensive. But peanut oil, I've always heard, is usually one of the really good go-tos, and it's not that expensive. Plus, I pretty much will only use peanut oil for frying, which is really convenient with, you have to like recollect the oil later if you're not using it for other stuff. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and bread this. Right. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to be taking the chicken, running it through the egg yolks, and then just get my setup here so I don't lose all my flour, and then into the flour. So let's kind of get that all nice coated. I'm just going to transfer and just work it. And basically I'm just going to kind of massage this because I want the flour to get in everywhere. Because again, the flour is going to be our spices. So you can see, just like picking up how now it instantly has all these places where there is no spice applied to it. So that's what I'm just kind of doing in this bowl, is just kind of working it, getting as much as I can everywhere. And one thing I would call out is that you don't have to do this all at once, because as we get to the frying later, the kind of way frying works out, there's only so much you can do at one time. Because if I were to say make 16 sandwiches, one, it would drop my temperature way too much. Also, it would crowd up the pot, like the actual pot, and then if they're resting on each other, you're not going to get really good breading. So it's actually way better to say, let's say I make this one, fully put everything together, and then put it in and fry, and then go do the next one. This is also one where this is really convenient if you have extra people, just because you're working with raw chicken, so you have someone that does that, someone that can really pay attention to what's frying, because that's something you want to make sure you're keeping safe. Cool, just gonna get that, continually just like pressing this in. I do want to mention that like I press it in, that's how I was taught to do it, because like if you just kind of drop flour on it, it won't stick in the same way and you won't get in those like creases. So I'm just going to keep going and going. We have our breading. All right. So next thing to talk about is I'm just going to get an oven mitt because I do not want to burn myself. And I'm just going to put these right in here. When I did this at home, I made them one at a time. Again, I don't want to overcrowd it, but I have enough here to actually put them both in, I believe. You can actually do this without a tong, because in theory, you should be fine as long as you're not getting splashed on. But you do want to, I'd say treat it pretty seriously. You do not want to burn yourself with 300-degree oil. So let's do that. I'm going to essentially just slowly lay it in so there's no splash back. because that's something I really want to avoid, is it actually splashing back on me because I just plopped it in. And before you put anything in, it seems like it might as well just be water. It doesn't have any signs that it's actually incredibly hot. So I'm going to put this in, trying to get some nice separation between them because I want them to fully fry. Also, get a big pot for this because you notice there's going to be a ton of just like splashing around, and you do not, basically you want to limit the oil that's going to come off of that because it is extremely hot. So a deep pot, again going back to you can't do too much because you can't fill it up that much, and you need like a certain ratio of oil to actual meat. So what's going to be the deal now is essentially I'm just going to wait for it to cook. So you can tell they're done because it's going to get that like kind of like reddish brown fried chicken look. And in my experience, by the time like the breading is done, the chicken is perfectly good. I will temp it just to like make sure it's 160, but I've never had it come under that temperature. While we're waiting for those to actually fry, I'm going to go ahead and start forming up these sandwiches. So I just have 2 hamburger buns, and I'm going to put on my condiments first. This is something that it's entirely open to you what you use. I'll start with some mustard. I like buying just fancy mustards or things that are exotic. Like every time I go to the grocery store and I want to get more, I literally just pick like a random one I haven't had before. And I'm the same way with hot sauces. Just because like you don't go through hot sauce like that fast, especially if it's pretty hot, you really only need a little bit of it. But I like kind of like slowly building up a knowledge to work with. And who knows, you might find one that's like just amazing. But also it's not a big deal if you find one that's just like, oh, this is too powerful. Like I got this one and I didn't know anything about it, but I really actually like how pungent the mustard is, which is why I wanted to use it here. Okay, next I'm going to take some simple onions. I try to put some of the condiments on first and then my loose ingredients effectively so they help hold it together. One thing that I tried with this that I kind of want to like experiment more with is I had a cookbook that specifically mentioned a fry sauce, and it was for burgers and fries, but effectively the fry sauce was just all the condiments of the burger all kind of mixed together. So it was like pickle juice, ketchup, mustard, I think a little of sugar even to make it sweeter. And I kind of like the idea of purposely blending your own condiments instead of having to like shuffle around how they actually get put together on the sandwich. So I just have some sun-dried tomatoes. This is purely just something I had around from the previous show, but they're nice, soft, have a lot of flavor, and are just good reuse. One thing I didn't bring for this show, but I would also recommend is pickles. They just go really well, especially if you get just like nice whole pickles and slice them horizontally. So you have like, almost like, I guess, like a Lincoln log or something. But I'm just going to kind of concentrate this around. I'm really trying to avoid stacking it all in the center so you have like this kind of axis that the whole sandwich is going to slide around on. I also like to keep the top free for the actual food. I'm actually going to pull that one off. Cool. I tried to also leave the cheese because I want my cheese to melt, so I just have it set off just to one side, and then once these are done and ready, I'm going to pull them off, set them just on some paper towels so they can kind of dry and cool off. And before I put them on the sandwich, that gives me time to also add the cheese to it, and the cheese should melt on. It's just a nice little touch. I think it can be very easy to essentially take cold cheese and you put it on a hot sandwich, and if there's not enough time for it to rest, it's kind of jarring. So we'll go ahead and check Now on our chicken. Yeah, it's looking done. So they just continue to build up some simple breading. Just off camera, I've been kind of stirring them because you'll notice that they float. And while they are going to be cooked everywhere because just the ambient heat, I want to build up the breading everywhere, so that's why I keep kind of shifting it. However, and one thing I'm trying to do right now is I'm trying not to clamp down too hard because I don't want to essentially smear all this breading off. And one thing I do want to mention is you can reuse the oil, particularly if you collect it. I think it's something like you can use it about 3 times. So right now would be a good time to like let it cool, do its own thing in the background. And then after usually the meal's done, because again, I take the oil very seriously. I don't want to do anything dangerous, so I like to have it cool, like off, alone, make sure it's completely cool, leave the thermometer in, just so I know it's 100% good. But anyway, and then after that, you essentially strain it to get out any extra little bits of breading, and then you would recapture it by like pouring it into a glass, and then you can throw it away from there or reuse it. Yeah. Let me sort all this. Cool. So here we have our chicken. Usually I leave it rest for like a couple minutes. Generally, obviously, if you're not going to eat it right then and there, you're fine because it is going to be incredibly hot. Like, taking that oil is even hotter than I like baked chicken at. So it's just something that you want to be aware of. Looks like this is cooling off pretty well. And again, this seems like it's kind of onerous, or like it's a big task to like have to do these all one at a time. But again, normally if I was making this for like a large group of people, this would be the time that you would now add, say, like the 3rd sandwich in. And you would like let that cook, put this like together, and then move on. So I'm just going to come here and carefully apply. Again, I'm trying really hard not to slide any breading off, because that's where a lot of the flavor is going to be. So it can be really easy just to come in here and, while it's not ruined, if you were to come and like just completely remove all the breading, then you lose basically all the seasoning, all the flavor, and it's still fine. It's still a chicken sandwich. It's just you're ruining kind of the best part. Okay, nice. There. Put on my buns and transfer over. I'm going to go ahead and cut into this one just to kind of give a nice cross section. I'm going to cut kind of with the grain, trying to keep everything on. Not the cleanest cut, but there we have our chicken sandwich. And again, this would be served with like fries, or I'd really recommend like some spicy jalapeno chips. It gives it more of a kind of like a deli feel. It's a really good lunch meal compared to, say, like a burger. But it's something where it's a lot of fun. Oil is definitely very concerning, but again, the fried chicken sandwiches, it has just kind of like this nice allure to it. It's like something you would make for an event or having people over. It would particularly work great for anything where you're not sitting down and having one big meal, but you're constantly just kind of making stuff as you go along. So like, oh, here's another 2 that are done, or maybe I'm cooking something over on a grill somewhere. And that's what I think is kind of so interesting about this. I also find this recipe to be particularly nice because a lot of times I'll buy, say, hamburger buns, and they'll come in a pack of like 8, and I want to cook like 2 burgers for me and my girlfriend. And then I just have all these hamburger buns, and I don't want to just eat just hamburgers, and I don't necessarily want to use them for regular sandwiches. And this fills that same slot while being different enough that it really like spices things up. So this has been Second Plate. I'm Grant, and thanks for watching.